There are clearly areas of where business is going today that may be more challenging for Europe. And we already had this hinted at it a number of times in the conference. I think Ilian talking about people saying to him as leader of INSEAD, well, will your organization be around in 20 years? We live in this era where the excitement, the optimism, the investment is not so much driven by bricks, but by new technology, by disruption. And so I think it's really important that we reflect on, well, where is this going to work for Europe? Right, as we see with Firmtech, with your company, on the one hand, Europe has this tremendous strength in science, engineering, and R&D, but is that going to be enough to really win in these new, often digital markets? To speak to that, we have our first faculty lecturer, my colleague Serguei Netessine, the Timken Chaired Professor of Global Technology and Innovation. And Sergei has a deep background researching technology, but lately he's been working a lot with young startups at INSEAD, has a new and impactful book on business model innovation. Please join me in welcoming Serguei Netessine. Very nice.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So my great pleasure to be here today to share with you a few brief thoughts on business model innovation as an engine of European growth. So I'm going to start by paraphrasing Ilian a little bit. So he mentioned that over a long time period, the increase in economic well-being comes from innovation. And if we were to ask ourselves, where are those innovations? Which innovations are going to bring us forward to the 21st century? There is a number of think tanks and various organizations that help us kind of to look into the future and make an educated guess of how the future is going to look like. One of them is the World Economic Forum. So I was there in January, and I received this report on the emerging technologies. So World Economic Forum was a fine organization, so they made some educated guesses, some very smart people there on a panel, and this is what they came up with. So many of those technologies are quite a mouthful. Some of them I didn't know existed. So if you ask yourself a question, what would it take to commercialize many of those technologies? Well, it certainly takes a lot of money. It also requires to have some smart people, some engineers, some scientists, some very well-educated people. And Europe has both. Europe has money, Europe has highly educated scientists. So if we were to look at how kind of various countries do on R&D, amount of money that they spend on R&D, which is on the horizontal axis here, and then on the vertical, there is a number of scientists and engineers that they graduate. You see that most developed European countries are right there in the top kind of a right quadrant. They have both a lot of money invested in R&D and smart people to actually make use of this money. So is this the future? Is this how Europe should continue to develop? We certainly, as Peter said, we have a fine tradition of great engineering innovations in Europe. Well, maybe. Certainly this is going to be part of our economic growth. But there is a bit of a problem with this kind of innovation. There is a bit of a kind of a dirty secret about innovating through new technology and new products. And I'll explain it in a simple example. So this is my kind of favorite example. So these are 4 technologies. All of them are very interesting novel technologies. And if I were to ask you, when those technologies appeared on the market, which ones of those would you predict would succeed? And let me give you a little background. So this is Apple Newton, right, created by Apple. Apple cannot fail, right? So $1.5 billion went into product number 1. This is Segway. Segway was built by probably the most famous inventor who lives now, Dean Kamian. It was supported by Steve Jobs himself. It was supported by Jeff Bezos. This cannot fail. 3 is Sony Betamax. This has a Sony R&D machinery behind it. Lots of smart people, lots of money. Again, this cannot fail. All of those were great technology. Sony Betamax was much better than the competing VHS technology. It was higher quality, higher reliability, yet all three of those technologies failed after consuming millions and millions and millions of dollars. This one, on the other hand, this is the stupidest technology I've ever seen. Okay? This is a toy. It's really annoying. It talks to your child, but it doesn't speak English. It speaks Furbish. Okay? So you have to learn another language which is only useful to talk to this ugly animal. What's even worse, it doesn't have a single button. You cannot switch it off. Okay? This is very frustrating. Okay? It just keeps talking to you, and anything you say in your apartment or house, it will just talk back in Furbish. Okay? The only way to deal with it is put it in a closet, and then it thinks it's night and it falls asleep. Okay? Now, as some of you may know, this is one of the most successful products ever produced, one of the most successful toys. Hundreds of millions sold. It had no R&D budget behind it. It had a couple of guys in a garage. So, the reason I'm showing you those technologies, 4 of them, is to make a point that it is extremely difficult to predict how technology of the future looks like. Is it Segway or is it Furby? Okay, so far it looks like Furby. So, what is the alternative? You need a lot of money to innovate technologies. You need smart people to innovate technologies. You also need to be extremely lucky. Because it looks like with many of those choices of what succeeds and what fails, it seems like mostly luck, not our ability to predict what the future is going to look like. So what's the alternative? Let me show you kind of a contrasting example which shows the difference, illustrates the difference between technological innovation and the other kind of innovation. So this is one of my favorite companies, this company called Netafim. It's a very important, very kind of impactful company. It brings drip irrigation to some of the driest regions of the world. And the company was founded by engineers. Their initial idea was to produce the best possible drip irrigation equipment. So they made a great equipment. It was shiny, you know, very expensive, very precise. It would deliver a small amount of water exactly to the root of the tree. Very important in regions where there is a limit on the amount of water you can consume. Now, there was a little bit of a problem with the company. So the equipment was great. It was so great, it would allow you to quadruple your crop yields. This was fantastic. It would pay for itself almost momentarily. But nobody was buying. Nobody was buying because, A, farmers that they were targeting with this equipment didn't really have enough money to do it. These were poor farmers. They generally could not afford to invest millions of dollars into expensive equipment. And 2, they didn't really trust the company. Sure, you are telling me this is a great technology, but how do I know? You sell it to me, and then you run away, and I have to deal with this shiny pile of metal. So the company, like all great engineers, they said, look, the problem is our technology is not good enough. Let's improve technology. So they worked really hard to make technology even better. So crop yields increased 500%. And still farmers wouldn't buy. They didn't have the money, and they still didn't trust the company. So then they said, okay, the problem is technology is too expensive, so let's reduce the cost. So they worked really hard to make the cost lower, but it was still higher than the status quo, which is doing nothing, using current technology. So technological innovation runs the company into the wall. This is where business model innovation came. The company said, look, we are the experts in technology. We know technology works, the farmers don't. So why don't we change the business models? We're going to go to the farmer, we're going to install this technology at no cost whatsoever. And then we're going to maintain the technology, we're going to take samples of the soil, we're going to keep track of dryness of the soil, of the air, and how many acids are there, and so on, and we're going to deliver the exact amount of water that is required. And we are experts in that. We've been doing this for many years. And then, at the end of the year, we're going to measure crop yield increase. And if indeed the farmer gets higher revenue, then we're going to split it with farmer 50-50. So this is when the growth took off. And now the company controls about 35% of the world's market share in drip irrigation. This is a highly fragmented market, lots of competitors, but because of a better business model, the company was able to prevail. So this is a good example that illustrates that sometimes technology is just not enough. With many new technologies, you have the same problems as Netafim does. The new technology is often unknown, its benefits is not proven, the new technology is often expensive. And so with a new technology, you often need a new business model. There are many other companies, Netafim is not the only one, there are many other companies which invent innovations, and I call those innovations hiding in a plain sight, because we don't necessarily think about these companies as great innovators. At some point, Mercier, a long time ago, invented a production process which allowed to make champagne available to wide masses. Before Mercier, only kings could afford to drink champagne. So Mercier did what Ford did to cars, to put it on a conveyor and produce cars and champagne in large quantities. Dell is a great innovator, although very few people would call it an innovative company, but at some point of time, they completely revolutionized the computer market by inventing production to order, by changing how computers were produced. They did not innovate technology. They used the same processors, the same memory chips as everybody else. To a consumer, Dell computer looked no different than any other computer, yet the company grew to $60 billion in sales very, very quickly. And then there are more recent examples, companies like Uber, Airbnb, again, companies which are not known for inventing great new technology. They made use of a pretty established technology. They made use of mobiles, they made use of internet. This did not require inventing something. Instead, what they invented is a new business model. So all of those companies and many, many more, which we documented in our book, in our recent book, they kept existing products and technologies. They did not really innovate product or technology. They did not try to invent a new market. They did not seek a new market niche to enter. Instead, they kept this fixed and focused on the business model. They focused on delivering product or service, the same product or service, in a superior way. Uber did not invent taxi. Taxis existed. People always had demand for taxis for hundreds of years. Uber reinvented the way taxis were delivered to people. So now, what relevance does this have to Europe? I believe that Europe is a test bed to many, many, many highly successful business models. And I have many, many examples of business models that were born in Europe, that were developed in Europe, and that were highly successful in Europe. I'll give you just a couple of brief examples in the interest of time. So my example number one is manufacturing. Now, manufacturing is dead in Europe, right? Well, not quite. At INSEAD, we've been running what's known as Industrial Excellence Award. Industrial Excellence Award every year helps us to pick the best factory in each of European countries. And we have a very rigorous selection process, factories apply, then we go and inspect them, and we select winner in each country. If you are interested, there is a recent Harvard Business Review article that summarizes what those new European manufacturing champions are famous for. And we saw a steady progression over the last 15 years or so. 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago, to be a champion in Europe among factories, what you had to do is use lean manufacturing, apply Toyota production principles. Now, this does not work anymore. This is just not enough. Chinese factories, other factories in Asia learned very well to apply the same principles. They produce high quality products and they are cheaper. So what do you have to do now? Now you have to start thinking about a different business model. Let me give you a couple of examples. Example number one, European manufacturing factories and data analytics. Companies such as Schmidt's Cargo Bull in Germany, they produce trailers, big trucks. The way they changed their business model, they started using extensively telematics. They installed telematics equipment on all the trucks, and this telematic equipment allows them to do big data analysis for the clients. And they allow, for example, to predict when the truck is going to break before it breaks. It allows to optimize routes. It allows you to track where the truck goes, where it doesn't go, how many miles it makes, and so on and so forth. Imagine, would a company in Europe that utilizes those trucks, would it be comfortable sharing all of this data with a manufacturer in China? Well, the answer is probably no, which is why Schmidt's Cargo Bull was highly successful in implementing this new business model. Another example is a company like e-tron in France. e-tron produces smart water meters. And it uses data analytics to predict water leaks, to detect unusual patterns in water consumption, and to detect those leaks and to help utilities save a lot of water. Again, would you be comfortable if you had a manufacturer somewhere in Asia analyzing this kind of data? Probably not, which is the reason why e-tron is highly successful after revamping its business model. One more quick example, a couple of companies that innovated their business model and went into customization. Asian manufacturers are great at producing standardized product in very large quantity at a small price. But what if you need 10,000 cockpit variations like this Daimler Smart Factory in France produces? Then it's very hard to deliver it without being in France, being integrated with many, many suppliers of various components that go into those 10,000 configurations. And companies like BUS Electronic in Germany competes in semiconductor manufacturing. This is extremely difficult. Most of this manufacturing went to Asia a long time ago. But BUS realized that most of those Asian factories only take upon themselves production in large quantities of standardized components. Instead, BUS focuses on producing small batches of highly customized components. So this is an example of how business models, competition through business models can be successful in Europe, how manufacturers in Europe can be highly effective. What else works in Europe? Let me show you one more example. Another thing that works in Europe is fashion. Just look around yourself. Look at your neighbors, right? Fashion is clearly born in Europe. And Europe has been a source of fashion for many, many, many years. United States always lags behind Europe in fashion. There are many pioneers in Europe that pioneered really, really novel business models in fashion. Of course, Inditex is one example. The founder of Inditex, Amancio Ortega, for 4 hours was the richest person in the world this year. Okay? He overtook Bill Gates, he overtook Warren Buffett. Unfortunately, Amancio Ortega is not INSEAD graduate, but nobody is perfect. So, Inditex has been highly successful in pioneering fast fashion business models. They came up with a novel idea of producing fashion every couple of weeks, constant updates. Every time you visit a store, you have a new fashionable collection installed there. This is as opposed to a normal course of events in a normal business model where fashion would come out 2 times a year. Now, of course, this became de facto a standard in fashion industry. Inditex became the biggest apparel manufacturer in the world. They are opening 2 retail stores per day. Think about this, 2 retail stores per day somewhere in the world. And this company, of course, was born in Spain. What are the other examples? So let's move a little bit from established companies to startups. There are many, many, many fascinating startups in the fashion space in Europe. Too many to mention. I'll just mention such concepts as Vente Privée, which basically pioneered many years ago the notion of private sales, private flash sales. The concept that later was picked up by showroomprivé.com and by many, many, many companies in the United States. But this business model was born in Europe, and it is highly successful in Europe. Vente Privée has more than $1 billion in revenues, and there are many, many, many competitors in Europe itself. 2 more examples. One more example. This is a company that was born in Europe, and it is highly successful in Europe. One of the biggest apparel manufacturer in the world. They are opening 2 retail stores per day. Think about this, 2 retail stores per day somewhere in the world. And this company, of course, was born in Spain. So I'm going to stop here with the example. So I gave you kind of 2 groups of examples. There are many, many more that were included in our book and many, many more that I could continue talking about. Let me summarize a little bit. So business model innovation is different. Business model innovation requires different competencies from companies, which includes startups and established companies. First of all, business model innovation cannot be done by an R&D department. Business models are based on laws of economics. And so if you want to innovate a business model, you cannot relegate it to engineers. Engineers do not know business models necessarily. This should be driven by CEO. Top managers from many functions need to be involved because business models involve sales, they involve marketing, they involve operations, they involve people from all different functions. You don't necessarily need a business model innovation department. All you need is small fluid teams which are formed on as-needed basis. And they work on analyzing current business model and they propose tweaks to them. You don't necessarily need a big budget for business model innovation. Think about it. How much money do you think it cost Michael Dell to invent a business model of Dell? This was probably not more than a pen and a pencil. This is a great thing. You don't really need a lot of money. Any startup with very limited budget can create a business model. All you need money for is some experimentation and prototyping to test out this business model and see if it really works or if you need to pivot from it. Finally, 3 things that I wanted to deliver today. In the interest of time, I want to limit my message to those 3 sub-messages. First, business model innovation is a blind spot of innovation. We often forget about business models when we innovate. And as you saw from my stories today, very often to move ahead a new technology, you actually need a new business model. But even without new technology, you can innovate purely through business model innovation. 2, it's a game-changing, widely applicable approach. It can be applied in industries ranging from oil and gas to shipping to consumer products, packaged goods, and so on and so forth. 3, business model innovation does require different competencies. It does require different people, different mindset, different approach. So this is where I'm going to stop. Please, if you have some exciting stories about business model innovations, let me know. We're going to see many more stories today. We're going to talk about some exciting startups, some exciting developed companies. Please stay in touch, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sergei. You want to take 1 or 2 questions? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Why don't we, just really interesting, why don't we pause for a second? 1 or 2 questions or comments from Sergei's talk. A few hands flying up. Right here in front, please. I just wait. And remember, when you introduce yourself, just say briefly where you're coming from. There you go.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anna Zurkan. I'm working for the company Standbys Transfer Management from Stuttgart, Baden-Württemberg. And first of all, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. We are working, bringing the gap between industry, academia, and government. I would like to ask you, in your view, how we can encourage more business to invest in research through engaging universities to foster economic growth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you see the universities even as an important player in business model innovation?
Absolutely. I think there are many ways. You can send directly check to Ilian. You can send it to me, you can send it to Peter, you can institute chairs, and so I would encourage you to talk. But kind of seriously, I certainly see education as an enabler of this link. I think we see it on the important juncture point. So, for example, big companies rarely talk to startups. These are 2 very separate worlds. They exist separately. They don't go to each other's conferences. We are in a good position to enable this link. Working on innovation, I split half of my time with big companies, half with startups, and another half with governments. Right? Yeah, 3 halves. 3 halves. Yeah, I have 36 hours in a day.
Very good.
Yeah.
1 more question right here, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kreska Nicholson. I'm a venture capital investor. Actually, have been one since INSEAD. And my question would be, how do you bridge the dichotomy, I'd say, with business models which are hugely successful, like Primark, like in low price fashion, and integrity and child labor conditions, and people wanting low prices, but it being highly unethical actually to produce in certain conditions.
So I guess your question is related specifically to Inditex example, right? For example, right? Right. So just kind of an aside comment, Inditex, unlike most other kind of fashion manufacturers, they are not a low-cost manufacturer. Most of their production is actually in Portugal, in Spain, in Turkey. Very small fraction of it is in China, right? And countries in Asia. And the reason is because they're a fast fashion company, so they need to deliver fashion fast, which does not really leave a lot of time to produce it in Far East and then deliver it to countries in Europe. But even putting that aside, there is business model innovation in sustainability, right? So you can think about sustainable business models, which rely, instead of relying on a short-term kind of a profit gain, on long-term relationships with suppliers, on relying on measures beyond profits, right? And certainly you can talk about business models as a kind of a value creation, not just a profit creation, but there are many highly successful business models which are focusing on sustainability, on social value, and so on. And in fact, we teach courses at INSEAD on that. So I think when you come up with a new business model, you have to put in front of yourself a clear objective. Is it pure profit? Then, of course, this is what you're going to get. But I think more and more we are moving towards business models which have some kind of a combination of profit, social value, responsibility for employees, and so on and so forth. So this is how business models are going to look like in the future, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Sergei.